Hi, Mrs. George here again. Chapter 3, I'm on today, chapter 3. Again, I'm reading the important bits and pieces for you, not the whole thing. The beloved objects that we had carried with us from place to place were now left behind in the wagon, and with them, finally, our illusions. That's really a good phrase. They had to leave everything behind in the wagon, even the precious objects that they had together with them, finally, even our illusions. Every few yards there stood an SS man. I told you SS man, they are actually the police officers. His machine gun trained on us. Hand in hand we followed the throng, and SS came towards us wielding a club. He commanded, men to the left, women to the right. 8 words spoken differently, spoken quietly, indifferently, without any emotion. And that of 8 words, they are men to the left, women to the right. 8 simple words, short words. Yet that was the moment when I left my mother. There was no time to think, and I already felt my father's hand press against mine. We were alone. It's at that moment that Elie Wiesel is getting separated from his family, or his mother to the right, and all just old men, just he and his dad to the left. And that's the moment when they felt that they were really alone. In a fraction of a second, I could see my mother, my sisters moved to the right. Sipora, the younger one, was holding her mother's hand. I saw them walking farther and farther away. Again, that separation we could see, especially that phrase. I saw them walking farther and farther away. Mother was stroking my sister's blonde hair as if to protect her, and I walked on with my father with the men. I didn't know that this was the moment in time and the place where I was leaving my mother and Zipporah forever. I kept walking, my father holding my hand. So he never realized that that will be the last time that he's going to see his mom and sister. Next page. Behind me, an old man fell to the ground. Nearby, an SS man replaced his revolver in its holster. My hand tightened its grip on my father. All I could think of was not to lose him, not to remain alone. So at that moment, Elie Wiesel's only hope is not to lose his father, just to be with him, not to remain alone. The SS officer gave the orders. From ranks of fives, there was a tumult. It was imperative to stay together. Hey kid, how old are you? The man interrogating me was an inmate. I could not see his face, but his voice was weary and warm. 15. No, you are 18. But I'm not, I said. I'm 15. Fool, listen to what I say. Then he asked my father, who answered, I'm 50. No, the man was sounded angry. Not 50. You are 40? Do you hear? 18 and 14. Sorry, 40. He disappeared into darkness. Another inmate appeared, unleashing a stream of invectives. Son of bitches, why have you come here? Tell me why. Someone dared to reply. What do you think? That we came here for our own free will? That we asked to come here? The others seemed ready to kill him. So that's all the conversation that is happening when they enter the camp. I'm just skipping bits and pieces there. And the flames, do you see them? Yes, okay, that's a little bit important. Over there, do you see the chimney over there? Do you see it? And the flames, do you see them? Yes, we saw the flames. Over there, that is where they will take you. Over there will be your grave. You still don't understand? Don't you understand anything? You will be burned. Burned to cinder, turned into ashes. So that is the place where they have been burning people, and that's the fire that the lady in the other chapter has been actually showing or seeing, and that's what she has been pointing out to. I heard whispers around me. We must do something. We can't let them kill us like that, like cattle in slaughterhouse. We must revolt. Again, we could see they revolt. They revolt. They are trying to be rebels, but again, they are very powerless at that moment. They though they wanted to do something, still they are powerless. Let the world learn about the existence of Auschwitz. Let everybody find out about it while they still have a chance to escape. But the older men begged their sons not to be foolish. Again, look at that phrase. It's the younger people who have been trying to be rebels. They wanted to revolt. But the older men begged their sons not to be foolish. We mustn't give up hope even now, as a sword hangs over our heads. So taught our sages, our rabbis, our priests. So that phrase actually shows that people, especially elder people, still they hold on to hope. Elder people hold on to faith. They hold on to faith. That's why they are asking the younger generations, the younger ones, to stop being foolish. That we must not give hope. Even now, as the sword hangs over our heads, don't give hope. They still have faith in God. They still have faith in God and in the humanity of their fellow humans. And that's why it says, "So taught our sages." That's how our elders have taught us. Sages have actually taught us. So we need to hold on to our faith. So when you talk about faith, maybe you could say that it's the elder people who actually hold on to the faith compared to the younger ones. So always try and bring up your. So these sentences will be useful later when you write your essay. The wind of revolt died down. We continued to walk until we came to a crossroads. Standing in the midst of it was, though I didn't know it then, Dr. Menkel, the notorious Dr. Menkel. Dr. Menkel is very famous. He's notorious, and he looked like the typical SS officer, cruel, though not until unintelligent face, complete with the monocle. He was holding a conductor's baton and was surrounded by officers. The baton was moving constantly, sometimes to the right, sometimes to the left. So this is more like Elie Wiesel is actually using a passing reference. It's allusion. He's alluding to a very famous, notoriously famous, notorious person, a very cruel person, uh, which was actually in the who was actually in the history. So that is a technique of allusion. Allusion means it's like passing reference to something, passing reference to someone who is known, or someone something, or someone who is famous, passing reference to someone who is famous. So it's allusion. The technique used is allusion. So he is actually a notorious, he was actually a notorious doctor who actually decided the selection of who was burned at Auschwitz and Birkenau. It was he who was actually deciding. So it's a passing reference to that person. And so in no time I stood before him. "Your age?" he asked, perhaps trying to sound paternal. "I'm 18." My voice was trembling. "In good health?" "Yes." "Your profession?" "Tell him that I was a student." "Farmer," I heard myself saying. This conversation lasted no more than a few seconds. It seemed like eternity. That seemed like it's never ending. The baton pointed to the left. I took half a step forward. I first wanted to see where they would send my father. Were he to have gone to the right, I would have run after him. The baton once more moved to the left. A weight lifted from my heart. So at that moment, a weight lifted from his heart, because Elie realized that both of them are going to the same place, both he and his father. And that was a great relief for him. We didn't know us yet, but still, we didn't know as yet which was the better side, right or left, which road led to prison or which to the crematoria. Still, I was happy because I was near my father. So that family and that bond is actually helping them a little bit. That bond is actually giving them hope. Another inmate came over to us, satisfied. "Yes," someone answered. "Poor devils, you are heading for the crematorium." He seemed to be telling the truth. Not far from us, huge flames, were rising from a ditch. Something was being burned there. A truck drew, that's very important, this paragraph. A truck drew close and unloaded its hold. Small children, babies. Yes, I did see this with my own eyes. Children thrown into the flames. Is it any wonder that ever since then sleep tends to elude me? So this moment is really important. It is the moment which actually shakes Elie Wiesel. Not just Elie Wiesel, even while we are reading, it it actually appeals to our emotion. It is really hard. So he says that a truck drew close and unloaded its whole. Small children, babies. Yes, I did see this with my own eyes. And look at the ellipsis. And the reason why he is using ellipsis is mainly because he he cannot even think about that particular situation. He is so emotional, and he doesn't even want to say that, and that might be the reason why he is, or why the author Elie Wiesel is actually using um, ellipsis. So if you don't know ellipsis, when you put three dots, that is actually ellipsis. Ellipsis. It's actually like omitting some sentences or suppressing parts of words or sentences. by putting three dots to indicate that the words have been to indicate that to indicate that the words have been omitted because he couldn't even speak that. So that particular technique is called ellipsis. That is E, by the way. E, ellipsis. Ellipsis. So that was where we were going. A little farther on, there was another large pit for adults. I pinched myself. Was I still awake? Was I still alive? How was it possible that men, women, and children are being burned and that the world kept silent? This is really important. That was the question in his mind. No, all this could not be real. A nightmare, perhaps. Soon I would wake up with a start, my heart pounding, and find that I was back in the room of my childhood with my books. So, this moment is really important because that completely shakes Elie Wiesel, and he couldn't even believe that this is happening in this present world. So that's why he is asking, was I still alive? Was I awake? How is it possible that men, women, and children are being burned? And how can the world keep quiet? So silence is of the, always you have to remember, silence is of the oppressed people. Silence. You could see the silence of the oppressed people because they are powerless, they are oppressed, and they have got no voice, and that's why they are keeping quiet. So the misfortune of his family, losing its home and possessions, didn't shake Ellie's beliefs. We saw that he lost his mom, sister, he lost his family. All those misfortune didn't shake Ellie's beliefs. But then the vision of children and babies thrown into the flames, that actually eats away his sense of God and the universe. And he started questioning God, and he started questioning his faith. He started questioning the other people, universe. Why are they keeping quiet? So this particular moment is really important in his life. That actually shakes his belief, and he started thinking about all this. So that actually started to eat him, eat away his sense of God and the universe. So that particular incident has completely shaken him. Again, what a shame. A shame that you did not go with your mother. I saw many children your age go with their mothers. His voice was terribly sad. So, dad is still thinking that people of your age could have gone with your mom. I understood that he did not wish to see what they would do to me. He did not wish to see his only son go up in flames. My forehead was covered with cold sweat. Still, I told him that I could not believe that human beings were being burned in our times. The world would never tolerate such crimes. See, again, he couldn't accept the fact that people are, or Germans are actually burying people and burning them, not burying, sorry, burning people, especially the babies. The world, the world is not interested in us. That's what his father says. The world is not interested in us. Today, everything is possible, even the crematoria. His voice broke. That also is really important because the world is not interested. People are keeping quiet. Father, I said, if that is true, then I don't want to wait. I will run into the electrified barbed wire. That would be easier than a slow death in the flames. So he says that Ellie says that I would. It's better for me to just run into the electrified barbed wire, and it will be easier than a slow death in the flame. He didn't answer. He was weeping. His body was shaking. Everybody among us was weeping. Someone began to say, recite Kaddish, the prayer for the dead. I don't know whether during the history of the Jewish people men have ever before recited Kaddish for themselves. So they started praying. That also is a bit important. They began to recite Kaddish, the prayer for the dead. They started praying for the dead people. Again, that's also a bit of foreshadowing that's going to happen. It gives us a hint about something that is going to happen. That also shows their faith. They are holding on to their faith even at that moment. Even though Elie Wiesel is questioning faith, still there are people who are praying, and especially praying for the dead people. And again, next sentence. For the first time, I felt anger rise within me. Okay, that's also a bit important. I'll read from that. So people started saying a prayer, and Ellie says that for the first time, I felt anger rising within me. Why should I sanctify His name? Now he is actually questioning his faith. He started to question his faith, starting to doubt his faith. Eliezer is questioning or doubting his faith. And he started to question, why should I sanctify? Why should I call his name, God's name, Almighty, the eternal and terrible Master of the universe, chose to be silent? What was there to thank him for? Again, that part is really important because he actually starts to doubt his faith. We continued our march. We were coming closer to the pit. We were walking slowly as one follows a hearse, our own funeral procession. Only four more steps, three. There it was now very close to us, the pit and the flames. I gathered all that remained of my strength in order to break rank. Deep down, I was saying goodbye to my father, the whole universe. Against my will, I found myself whispering again. That's a bit important. Deep down, I was saying goodbye to my father, to the whole universe, and against my will, even though Eliezer did not wish, I found myself whispering the words, the prayers, may his name be exalted and sanctified. My heart was about to burst. There I was face to face I was face to face with the angel of death. So even though he was preparing to die at that moment, he was ready to die. He was saying goodbye to his father against his will, and that line is really important. Against his will, even though he doubted God, against his will, he started to whisper the words and he started to exalt and sanctify God's name. So that shows that he still holds on to clings. People still hold on to faith. People still cling on to faith. People hold on to faith at the time of their death. At the time of their sufferings or at the time of death or at their last minutes. Now, two steps from the pit, we were ordered to turn left and herded into barracks. I squeezed my father's hand. He said, "Do you remember Mrs. Schachter in the train?" So that day they just escaped. They just escaped from dying. And again, this whole passage, that paragraph is really important. And it's all written, and that first part is written in capital letters. Never shall I forget. And it says, never shall I forget that night. The first night in the camp that turned my life into one long night, 7 times sealed. And again, look at that word night. That was a complete darkness. That night actually, it refers literally to the night of the burning of the children. So literally that refers to the night when they actually saw the babies being burned, but metaphorically to the darkness of mourning and the darkness of Eliezer's life without God he once believed in so fervently. So that night is actually dark because one, because they have seen the death of the children. Second, because he has completely lost his faith. God, he is starting to doubt God. And he says, never shall I. And you could see the repetition of the phrase, never shall, never shall, never shall I. Never shall I forget that smoke. Never shall I forget the small faces of the children whose bodies I saw transformed into smoke under a silent sky. Again, that is a literary technique, a silent sky, alliteration. And why is he using that alliteration? To stress on the importance or to emphasize on the silence of the world. Silence, smoke under a silent sky, alliteration. To emphasize on the darkness of that night. Never shall I forget those flames that consumed my faith forever. That line is really important. He says that never shall I forget those flames that consumed my faith forever. Because the death of the killing of the children or the burning of the children, that has actually completely made him to doubt God. That actually metaphorically, it is the darkness of the morning and the darkness of Eliezer's life that God he once believed in so fervently. So that has actually consumed his faith. That's what he says. That particular incident consumed his faith. Never shall I forget the nocturnal silence that deprived me of for all eternity for the desire to live. He doesn't even feel like living. Never shall I forget those moments that murdered my God again. That murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams to ashes. Remember, in chapter 1, I told you he is a boy who would like to be like a rabbi, like a person who would like to know more about divinity. But he was a very faithful person. But now he says that this particular night, the night where he actually saw the burning of the children, that actually has shattered him. That moments, I forget those moments. Never shall I forget those moments that murdered my God. He had a God in his life. He had a good connection and rapport and faith with through the faith of that God, but that is completely murdered now. Never shall I forget those things, even where I condemn to live, as long as God Himself never. So this particular passage is really important, and he uses repetition there. Elie Wiesel uses that repetition to emphasize on his sorrow. Repetition of the phrase never shall I forget, never shall I forget. That particular phrase is repeated, never shall I forget. And that particular phrase is repeated, and it's mainly to show the mainly to emphasize his sorrow, the confusion that he has in his mind, to show his darkness of the mind. So that is really important. Okay, the barrack had been assigned to us very long. On the roof, a few bluish skylights, skipping all that. Dozens of inmates were there to receive us, sticks in hand, striking anywhere, anyone without reason. The orders came, strip, hurry up. So, orders, hold on to your only to your belt and your shoes. So, again, they have been asked to strip off. And that's also loss of their identity. Their identity is completely lost at that moment. Loss of identity. My writing is terrible on this. Loss of identity. And it's inhumanity as well, brutality, the way that they are dealing with the prisoners, inhuman. And still, hurry up, hold on to your belt and your shoes. So they are completely losing their identity. Our clothes were to be thrown on the floor at the back of the barrack. That shows their lack of identity. A few SS officers wandered through the room looking for strong men. If vigor that was appreciated, perhaps one should try to appear sturdy. My father thought the opposite, better not to draw attention. We later found that he had been right. Those who were selected that day were incorporated into the commando work, especially to work in the crematoria. Bella Katz, the son of an important merchant of my town, had arrived in Birkenau with the first transport on 1 week ahead of us. When he found out that we were there, he succeeded in slipping us a note. He told us that having been chosen because of his strength, he had been forced to place his own father's body into the furnace. Again, look at the cruelty. Look at the cruelty of the people. He was forced to place his own father's body into the furnace. Brutality, inhumanity. The blows burned to rain. The blows continued to rain on us to the Baba, belt and shoes in hand. So they have been constantly. The blows continued to rain on us. My head was. Their clippers tore out our hair, shaved every hair on our bodies. My head was buzzing. The same thought surfacing over and over, not to be separated from my father. Again, loss of identity there as well. Their identity is completely lost. Loss of identity. Again, I'm skipping some. Next page. I no longer was afraid. I was overcome by fatigue. The absent no longer entered our thoughts. One spoke of them. Who knows what happened to them? So it's all about people who have been crying. Was with joy. The absent was no longer. One spoke of them. Who knows what happened to them? But their fate was on our minds. We were incapable of thinking. Our senses were numbed. Everything was fading into a fog. We no longer clung to anything. The instincts of self-preservation, self-defense, of pride had all deserted us. So they have self-preservation. They have been trying to preserve themselves, but now all that has deserted them. In one terrifying moment of lucidity, I thought of us as damned souls wandering through the void, souls condemned to wander through the space until the end of time, seeking redemption, seeking oblivion. without any hope of finding either. Around 5 o'clock in the morning, um, we were expelled from the barrack. The capos, as I told you, capos are prisoner functionary. They are the prisoners, but they will be in charge. Prisoner functionary, often they will be the convicted criminals, but they will be given power over the other prisoners. They are capos. Capos means prisoner functionary. Prisoner functionary. Capos means prisoner functionary. A prisoner who is dealing with functioning. A prisoner who has got the power. Prisoner functionary. The capos were beating us again, but I no longer felt the pain. A glacial wind was enveloping us. We were naked, holding our shoes and belt. Again, identity, loss of identity. Run, and we ran. After a few minutes of running, a new barrack. Again, treating them like animals. That's what we see here. Treating like animals. Treating like animals. A barrel of foul-smelling liquid stood by the door. Disinfection, everybody soaked in it. Then came a hot shower. I'm skipping some. In a few seconds, we had ceased to be men. Lost their identity. He had loss of identity. Again, the theme of loss of identity back there. We ceased to be men. They were treating them more like animals. We looked pretty strange, he says. We looked pretty strange. Able to highlight. I don't know, I'm not able to highlight. We looked pretty strange. Meerkats, the closest way wore a child's pants and stern, a skinny little fellow. So they have completely changed. The identity, loss of identity. I glanced over at my father, how changed he looked. Change is another important theme. Change is another theme. Change of their identity. Change of their identity. Their identity will be changed. Later on, we could see that their love and their family bond, everything is changing because of the circumstances. So change is really an important theme. The night had completely passed. The morning star shone. I too had become a different person. Again, change. All these phrases. You could use all these for change. I too had become a different person. The student of Talmud, the child I was. I want to highlight the whole thing. Yeah. So that whole thing is all about change. Change that has happened in Elie Wiesel's life. I too had become a different person. The student of Talmud, the child I was, had been consumed by the flames on that night. Remember the night of the when he saw the children were burned, babies were burned, and he says that all my faith and everything has actually been consumed by the flames. All that was left was a shape that resembled me. My soul had been invaded and devoured by a black flame. So we could see the change of characters. So many events had taken place in just a few hours that I had completely lost all notion of time. So they have got no idea about time. I'm skipping some. Not far from us, prisoners were at work. Some were digging holes, others were carrying sand. None as much as glanced at us. We were withered trees in the heart of the desert. A beautiful, um, beautiful figurative speech description. We were withered in trees in the heart of the desert. Behind me, people were talking. I had no desire to listen to what they were saying or to know who was speaking and what about. Nobody dared to raise his voice, even though there was no guard around. We whispered, perhaps because of thick smoke that poisoned the air. We were herded into yet another barrack inside the gypsy camp. So they have been moved to a gypsy camp. We fell into ranks of 5. And now stop moving. Again, there was no floor, a roof, and 4 walls. Our feet sank into the mud. Again, the waiting. I fell asleep standing up. So look at the living conditions. I dreamed of a bed of my mother's hand on my face. I woke. I was standing, my feet in the mud. Some people collapsed, sliding into the mud. Again, the inhumanity, brutality. Are you crazy? We were told to stand. Do you want to get us all in trouble? all of us, as if all the troubles in the world were not already upon us. Little by little, we all sat down in the mud, but we had to get up whenever a couple came in to check if by chance somebody had a new pair of shoes. If so, we had to hand them over. I had new shoes myself, but as they were covered with thick coat of mud, they had been not noticed. I thanked God. I thanked God in an improvised prayer for having created mud in His infinite and wondrous universe. Again, we could see still He is having that faith. He is still hold on to faith. Suddenly, the silence became more oppressive. An SS officer had come in, and with him, the smell of the angel of death. It's just a metaphor. So, comparing the comparing the SS officer to the angel of death, because he is the one who takes their lives. He's the one who is going to take their life. At times, I'm not able to highlight. I don't know, guys, why that is, but I want you to highlight the angel of death. I will just underline that for you. So it's a beautiful metaphor, the angel of death, comparing the SS officers to the angel of death. So it is a metaphor comparison, considering SS officer as the angel of death. Again, I'm skipping some. You are in a concentration camp in Auschwitz. A pause he was observing the effects his words had produced. His face remained in my memory to this day. A tall man in his 30s came, crime written all over his forehead and his gaze. He looked at us. He looked at us as one would a pack of leprous dogs clinging to life. Again, there is a simile. Remember, he went on, remember it always. Let it be graven in your memories. You are in Auschwitz, and Auschwitz is not a convalescent home, it's a concentration camp. Here, you must work. If you don't, you will go straight to the chimney. To the crematorium, work or crematorium, the choice is yours. Again, people are treating, SS officers are treating them brutally and frightening them, scaring them. We had already lived through a lot that night. Again, look at the word night. Remember, don't forget that this is the title of the text. Every time that title is emphasized, he always refers to the word night. Again, the rest of us were transferred to yet another barrack, this one of stone. We had permission to sit down. A gypsy inmate was in charge. My father suddenly had a colic attack. So in that camp, his father had a colic attack, like an acute abdominal pain. He got up and asked politely in German, "Excuse me, could you tell me where the toilets are located?" The gypsy stared at him for a long time, and from head to toe, as if he wished to ascertain that the person addressing him was actually a creature of flesh and bone, a human being with a body and a belly. So again, brutality, inhumanity. He slapped my father with such force that he fell down and then crawled back to his place on all fours. Inhumanity, brutality. I stood petrified. This is really important because he says, I stood petrified. What happened to me? My father had been struck in front of me and I had not even blinked. That actually touched me a lot because that actually is his guilt at inaction. He was guilty. Guilt and inaction actually filled him, and he was not able to act. He stood petrified. What had happened to me? My father had just been struck in front of me, and he says, and I had not even blinked. I had watched and kept silent. And again, that happens. People changes at times because change that has happened. Before that, we know that he was so keen about his father, but now he know that if he is going to support his father, he is also going to be in trouble. So change has actually happened. Only yesterday I would have dug my nails into the criminal's flesh had I changed that much. Now he says that he is able to recognize the change that has happened to him. He says that if it was yesterday, if someone is striking my father like this, I would have dug my nails into that criminal's flesh. But today I have just been there. I just blinked. I had not even blinked. I had just watched and kept silent. So we could see the change that has happened to LED cell change. It's more like he's trying to preserve himself, self-preservation, because he know that if he's going to try and support his father, he's also going to be in trouble. So change and self-preservation because of the situation, because of the circumstances. And he himself is asking, had I changed that much so fast? And remorse began to gnaw at me. All I could think was, I shall never forgive them for this. My father must have guessed my thoughts, because he whispered in my ear, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. His cheek chill bore the red mark of the hand. So his change and his inaction, his guilty feeling, all that we could see, his helplessness, we could see that here. Again, everybody outside, a dozen or so gypsies had come to join our guard. The clubs and whips were cracking around me. My feet were running on their own. I tried to protect myself from the blows by behind, hiding behind others. It was spring, the sun was shining. Again, so whips were cracking around me. Brutality. He was trying to um, evade the blows by hiding behind others. Just skipping some, we marched, gates opened and closed. We continued to march between the barbed wire. At every step, white signs with black skulls looked down us, the inscription, warning, danger of death. Again, um, look at the capital letters. Why do you think Elie Wiesel has used that capital letter to emphasize that? The inscription, warning, danger of death. What irony! Was there here a single place where one was not in danger of death? So he's thinking about the irony of that such kind of a board. And again, but no sooner had we taken a few more steps than we saw the barbed wire of another camp. They are going into another camp now. This one had an iron gate with overhead inscription, Arbeit match free, work makes you free. That's a German phrase which means work makes you free, and they are in Auschwitz. Again, the first impression of Auschwitz is better than Birkenau. Cement buildings, everything was much better than um, Birkenau, better than Birkenau, the other camp. Our clothes had been left behind. We had been promised other clothes. Around midnight, we were told to run faster. Elder guards, the faster you run, the faster you will go to sleep. Again, inhumanity. After a few minutes of racing madly, we came to a new block. The man in charge was waiting. He was a young Paul. He was a young Paul who was smiling at us. He began to talk to us, and despite our weariness, we listened attentively. So this time we are meeting a new officer, a young Polish person, and they all feel that he is a bit better than the others. Comrades, you are now in the concentration camp. Um, you are now in the concentration camp. Auschwitz. Ahead of you lies a long road paved with suffering. Don't lose hope. You have already eluded the first danger, the selection. Therefore, muster your strength and keep your faith. We shall all see the day of liberation. Have faith in life, 1,000 times faith. By driving out despair, you will move away from death. Hell does not last forever. And now here is a prayer, or rather a piece of advice. Let there be camaraderie among you. Let there be brotherhood among you. We are all brothers and share the same fight. Help each other. That is the only way to survive. So, for everyone, he seems to be such a nice person. That's all. Go to sleep. Two people to bunk. Good night. Those were the first human words. Now, he could see some kind of humanity. Even in the midst of inhumanity, there were moments of humanity, hope, optimism, everything. So they could see moments of flickering hope, or moments of humanity they could see through this young Polish person. And that's why he says those were the first human words. No sooner had we climbed into our bucks than we fell into deep sleep. The next morning, the veteran inmates treated us without brutality. We went to wash. We were given new clothing. They brought us black coffee. So it was life was a bit better in Auschwitz here, better than what they saw in Birkenau. So our morale was much improved. A good night's sleep. Friends met, exchanged a few sentences. We spoke of everything without ever mentioning those who had disappeared. The prevailing opinion was that the war was about to end. Again, hope. They all have got hope at that moment. They hope that the war is going to end. At about noon, we were brought some soup, one bowl of thick soup for each of us. I was terribly hungry, yet I refused to touch it. Again, you could see that even though he was terribly hungry, he refused to touch it. I was still the spoiled child of long ago. My father swallowed my ration because father had more experience, and father knew clearly that if they're not eating, they're going to be weak, and that's not going to help them. So we could see how Eliezer is avoiding or refusing to touch it. In the afternoon, they made us line up. The prisoners brought a table and some medical instruments. We were told to roll up our left sleeves and file past the table. The three veteran prisoners, needles in hand, tattooed numbers on our left arms. I became I became A7713. From then on, I had no other name. That is really important because that gives us the theme of loss of identity. They have got no name from that day onwards. They have been tattooed, just a number. They just became a number. So the loss of identity, that's what you could see there. And that actually reinforced the idea that they are no longer a person. Then I'm sure you might have seen people tattooing or putting numbers on animals. Same way, they have been tattooed numbers. So treating them animals, like animals, inhumanity, inhumanity. Skipping a bit more, days went by. The morning's black coffee, midday, third day, I was eagerly eating any kind of soup. So he started eating soup now. He understood that it's better to eat. Auschwitz, we had already been in Auschwitz for 8 days. And then they are meeting one of their relative. The fellow's eyes narrowed. Took a long look at my father. You don't know me. You don't recognize me. I'm your relative, Stein. Already forgotten, Stein from Antwerp, Raisel's husband. Your wife, Raisel's aunt, she often wrote to us in such letters. So they are relatives. They are meeting each other now. My father had not recognized him. He must have barely known him because his father was always busy with the social service and the service given to the communal affairs. He was always fully immersed in communal affairs. So doesn't know much about the family matters. So that's why father doesn't know that relative a lot. He told us that so that Stein is actually he told us that he had been deported in 1942. He said, I heard people say that a transport had arrived from your region and I came to look for you. I thought you might have some news of his Raisel and my two small boys who stayed in Antwerp. So that's why he came. He just wanted to know if Eliezer and his father knew anything about his wife and his two small boys. I knew nothing about them. Since 1940, my mother had not received a single letter from them, but I lied. Yes, my mother did hear from them. Rachel is fine, so are their children. So, why do you think Eliezer actually lied there? He clearly said that I knew nothing about them, but still he said I lied. Why do you think so? Because he is trying to instill hope in the mind of Stein, because hope is the only thing that they are holding on to. And Elie Wiesel could really understand the importance of hope, and that's why he actually lied to Stein. And he lied saying that yes, his wife and children, their mother heard from them and they are fine. So, moments of hope, helping each other and trying to give hope, that's really important. We remained in Auschwitz for 3 weeks. Um, the unskilled were kept until the end. The start of the third week, we were removed. He was judged to inhumane. So that particular uh, Blocktalse, that's a German word which means capo, which means prisoner functionary. He has been removed. Remember the young Polish person? He has been removed because he was judged too human. So he was not brutal enough. So they changed that guy. Stein continued to visit and inquire about his wife. And Stein says to the dad, take care of your son. He's weak, very dehydrated. Take care of yourselves. He must avoid selection. Eat anything, anytime. Eat all you can. The weak don't last very long around here because he had more experience. He came before. So he is actually trying to help others and support others and asking them to eat properly and take care of each other. The only thing that keeps me alive, he kept. And he himself was thin, so withered, so weak. The only thing that keeps me alive, he kept saying, is to know that Rachel and the little ones are alive. So that is all about hope. That hope is actually making him or holding on. That is the hope that he is holding on to. He believes that nothing has happened to Rachel, and that hope actually keeps him moving. We never saw him again. He had been given the good news, the real news later on. Evening, as we lay on our cots, we sometimes try to sing Hasidic melodies. Now comes Akiba drummer. It's an important character. Akiba drummer would break our hearts with his deep voice, deep, grave voice. Some of the men spoke of God, his mysterious ways, the sins of the Jewish people, and the redemption to come. As for me, I had ceased to pray. That's really, I think you need to highlight that sentence. As for me, I want to change it to a different color. As for me, As for me, I had ceased to pray. I concurred with Job. I was not denying his existence, but I doubted his absolute existence. So we could see the change in Elie Wiesel. We could see his loss of faith. It's not a loss of faith, but he is doubting his faith. He just doubts his faith, doubts Jesus, doubts God. So, as for me, I had ceased to pray. I concurred with Job. I was not denying his existence, but I doubted his absolute justice. Akiba Drummer then said, God is testing us. That whole paragraph is really important. God is testing us. He wants to see whether we are capable of overcoming our base instincts, of killing the Satan within ourselves. We have no right to despair. And if he punishes us mercilessly, it is a sign that he loves us that much more. So you could see the faith. You could see the faith of Akiba Drama, such a faithful person. He says that God is testing us. On the contrary, we could see Elie Wiesel's change, where he is actually doubting the divinity or the God. And that's all. And towards the end, after 4 hours, we arrived at the new camp, Buna. Now they reached the new camp Buna. The iron gates closed behind us. So at first they were in Birkenau, then Auschwitz, and now in Buna. That is the end of this chapter.